Hi, everyone. So we will be now beginning with our panel discussion session-wise. So for our first session, we are going to discuss on repurposing and repowering of mining land and old power plants for green growth. So the run of the entire panel discussion would be like there would be a context-setting presentation which will introduce you to the topic, followed by a brief panel discussion, and then a 10 minutes Q&A from the audience. So for the panel, we have Ms. Mandvi Singh, our Program Director for Renewable Energy. And for our panel, let me introduce you to the panelists. We have Mr. Anil Kumar Singh, Director Technical Western Coalfields Limited. Mr. Ajit Pandit, Founding Director and CEO, IDAM Infrastructure Advisories Private Limited. Mr. Ashok Srinivas, Group Coordinator, Prayas Energy Group. Mr. Gurudas Nulkar, Director, Center for Sustainable Development, Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. Mr. P.K. Kotecha, Chief Engineer, Mahagenco, Mumbai. So now I'd like to invite, and the session is moderated by Mandvi, and Mandvi is also giving a short presentation before the discussion. Over to you, Mandvi.
So, hi, my name is Mandvi and I work as the Program Director for the Energy and Climate Change Program at iForest. And the first session that we have, the second section of the day, but the first session in terms of discussing specific verticals that Mr. Chandrabhushan had highlighted as being key in this discussion of transition and green growth from Maharashtra's perspective. Transition really, as CB had sort of contextualized in his initial presentation, a question of opportunity. And in this session, we'll discuss the opportunities from the perspective of coal mining and the thermal plant sector. Now, coal is important for Maharashtra. These numbers were sort of shared with you in the initial presentation also, but just to reiterate how important it is, Maharashtra is the 6th highest coal producing state in India. There are 52 operational mines at the moment, and with a capacity of 86 million metric tons per annum. The production last year represented 7% of the total production across the country. Even more important, I suppose equally important, is that the TPP capacity is the largest currently in the country. That is 11% of the total national capacity. Now, what does this imply in terms of the significance that this sector has as far as employment, as far as economic dependence is concerned? Very interesting numbers. 45,000 formal workers are employed in the thermal power plant sector, and 29,000 formal workers are employed in the coal mining sector. This, of course, includes both departmental and contractual worker, and we see the much larger share of contractual workers being there in the thermal power plant sector. The economic dependence in terms of the of course induced economic impact, the local economy impact is much wider. A sort of indicative number associated with this economic dependence is that WCL drives an estimated economy of about 10,000, more than 10,000 crores annually as far as Maharashtra is concerned. And the public revenue contribution is also massive across the various sort of domains of being royalty and DMF, etc., at about 5.5 thousand crores. In this context of the kind of impact that this sector has and the contribution that it has, what are we talking about in terms of the repurposing opportunity? Now, again, this is a conversation to kind of have in terms of when the transition is going to happen and in what form, and you can debate in terms of timelines, whether this decade or the next decade, etc. But we do understand that this shift will gradually happen, and it is up to the planners and the stakeholders in the sector to kind of ensure that this is used as an opportunity and not let it become a sort of disaster that we've seen it shape into in many geographies in the world. So in context of mines, we're looking at the initial impact being on unprofitable and end-of-life mines. Nearly half of the mines currently operational are unprofitable mines. And when you look into the reasons for it, and it's there in our report, a lot of it is due to resource depletion. And the question is now, how do you kind of utilize this, and how do you ensure that this is closed in a scientific manner, which is also leading to local economic development. Similarly, for repowering of coal power plants, 20% of the existing units, which add up to about 4.4 gigawatt, uh, are very old and inefficient. So that becomes your focus area for the immediate duration, immediate timeline. To where do you experiment in terms of what is a good repowering model look like for Maharashtra? Land across all of this is a very, very crucial opportunity. Uh, Already we had seen in the initial presentation, there's 42,000 hectares of land available across the operational mines, of which, of course, we now understand that around 50% of this is where unprofitable capacity is located. And similarly, across TPPs, there's massive amount of land, which is about 13,000 hectares. Right now, as far as mine closure plans currently are concerned, it's largely focusing on plantations or water body creations, but really not on building new economic opportunities. Similarly, for decommissioning TPPs, the older model was that once a unit is decommissioned, you replace it with a much higher, more efficient unit, which will obviously not which we've seen seeing trends that this is not what is happening going forward. In fact, it's not been happening for the past few years now. This is a slide I'll not dwell upon, but CB has already mentioned it in terms of the geography is not aligning at the moment, and there's a lot of opportunity in the coal region itself, with the land being available for that green growth to be designed. We'll discuss more about the crucial aspects because that's what the session is about in terms of taking it up, these specific issues with our experts. How do you determine the schedule for this phase down going forward? How to repurpose the coal land to ensure that there is economic diversification and job creation within these areas. How the workforce transition should be planned, where a lot of these are informal workers with very little social security available already. And how do you prioritize transition within these hotspots, these geographies that we've highlighted in the previous slide? And how do you utilize funds which are already available within the system to kind of at least kickstart the transition, because obviously redevelopment would cost a lot more. With that, I'll invite the panelists to please join me on the dais so that we can just go through these specific things in detail. Ashok, I'll start with you, the shooting of questions. So, like I said, there's nearly 4.4 gigawatt of TPP capacity, which is very old and inefficient in Maharashtra right now. Closure is imminent this decade or the next 15 years. We do see examples of very good repowering and repurposing across many geographies within India as well. We've seen examples at least being tried in, I don't know good or bad, but Badapur is trying to repurpose or redevelop. What do you see as key learnings? What do you see as key sort of criteria to be kept in mind for that to happen in the most optimal manner going forward?
Thanks, Mandvi. And before I start, I think it's only appropriate that I thank iForest CB Shrestha Mandvi, not only for inviting me, but also to apologize to them partly because I have been really sitting on their heads and pressurizing them, saying that because I need to unfortunately rush back to Pune, which is where I'm from, and I've been pushing them to say, okay, please, मुझसे जो भी कहलवाना है पहले कहलवा दो, फिर मैं भाग जाता हूँ. So apologies for that, but I hope you understand. And I also, as somebody who now, though I'm not originally from this state, I call myself a Maharashtrian now. So from that point of view, welcome you all to Maharashtra. I'm very glad you've taken up a study of Maharashtra, which is India's largest state by far, both from an economy point of view, industry point of view, and so many points of view. on most criteria, Maharashtra is about 10 to 12% of India. So I think in that sense, it's a very important state, and I'm very glad that you've taken up this study. To respond specifically to the question you asked, if I may, I would like to respond by just stating what we believe are some important things that we as a state, Maharashtra as a state, needs to prepare for in the process of this transition. One of which is, of course, the issue of closure of TPPs themselves. But fundamentally, we think that while this transition is going to take place over, as you said, an uncertain time frame, perhaps a decade or two, uh, it is still a very volatile sector, and a lot of other systems and processes need to start responding to these changes, which we don't think is happening at the scale that it's required. There are changes, of course, both at the central and state level. A lot of changes have started happening, but I think a lot more needs to move, especially on the side of the coal-based power generation front. Primarily because fundamentally we think that the basic shift that is happening is still not been internalized, which is that coal is no longer going to be the base load firm power source for supplying power going forward. Today it is going to be, maybe even 3 years, 5 years from now it will be, but 10 years from now we hope it won't be. We all hope it won't be. And that is a big shift, and for that there's a lot of changes that need to happen, not only in terms of technical flexibilization, in terms of ramping up, ramping down, that a lot of us are talking about, but in terms of systems, in terms of regulations, in terms of contracts, in terms of how we look at the entire system. We recently came out with a report where we tried to posit some ideas of how we can look at some of these issues, but that is something that I think all of us need to start thinking about, including in Maharashtra, and including the generators, regulators, and the discoms, and so on. Specifically, one other thing that as a state we feel that we need to think about a little bit, and I'm glad we have Mr. Kuticha from Mahajanko also here, but we feel that unlike, let's say, an NTPC, which I think has started thinking about the future much more proactively in terms of, they have a whole RE vertical, and they're venturing into diversifying into other things. From a public sector point of view, we think that other public sector generating companies perhaps are not doing enough, and that is something that we feel is a bit of a concern. Mahajanko, I know, does have an RE division, and they are thinking about renewables and so on, but we think that a lot more systematic, more clearer understanding of the transition required, so that as an organization, because we firmly believe that a public sector state-owned entity has a role to play, even in a competitive renewables-driven future that is going to be much more competitive than what it is today. But a public sector still has a role to play, and therefore we think that Mahajanko needs to reorient itself gradually to that. And I think as far as land repurposing is concerned, frankly, I'm not an expert on that. I don't think I have too much to offer, other than to say that 2 points that I just want to make there is, one, I think, which already your report also talks about, is the extreme importance of inclusivity in that process. The fact that communities need to be part of this process of deciding what the repurposing needs to be, but otherwise we make the same mistakes that we made in the past. Second is, I think, unfortunately, in India, we still don't have a policy regulatory understanding of what a decommissioning of a TPP even means. I think that CPCB was supposed to be coming out with something which has been, as far as I know, not come out for the last 2 or 3 years based on that NGT order. So right now, effectively, decommissioning a TPP is equivalent to just abandoning it as far as the thermal power plant is concerned, because they don't have any legal obligations to do anything. And I feel that that needs to get addressed very soon before we can even start meaningfully talking about how we want to decommission it, because otherwise TPPs will say we have no responsibility to doing anything. Unlike, let's say, in coal mines, where I think there's a much better defined framework. However, we may have disagreements with it, but at least there is a framework on how mines need to be decommissioned. There is a mechanism for collecting funds for it, and so on and so forth. So I think that's something that we need to get greater attention for. Yeah, I think that's probably about all that I have to say. The last point, which is a very minor point from perhaps because it's very preliminary analysis that we are doing. Actually, I'm glad you're talking about the oil and gas industry and refineries also, because our analysis shows that if India actually achieves its aggressive EV targets, perhaps oil, at least some of the petroleum products, might see a transition even faster than coal if we are going to do that, if we successfully achieve that. So that's an important thing to look at, but this is very preliminary analysis. We need to look at that. Thanks, and sorry if I overshot my time. 45 seconds.
No, great. Thank you, Ashok, and thank you especially for kind of highlighting the fact that decommissioning of TPP is a very, very new sort of concept for the country. Because, like I said earlier, that the previous model was that you decommission the older, smaller one, and then you set up a new plant there. But now the question of how do you reclaim the land, how do you decontaminate it? In fact, what are the elements of that decontamination? How do you repurpose it? Those are really questions that even CPCB is kind of struggling with in the sense of understanding the requirements. And of course, linked to that is the requirement of financing for it. So far, our tariffs do not account for the cost of decommissioning. We don't even understand the cost of decommissioning very clearly as far as sort of regulators is concerned. And this conversation has only just started with the CRC also now kind of considering including that decommissioning cost into the tariffs. So yes, thank you for highlighting that. And if you do have to leave during this conversation, please feel free. I will come now to you, Mr. Singh. WCL we saw is in possession of a very large quantity of land, which is no problem, no problem. Sure. That's around 42,000 hectares, and a significant majority of it is currently with unprofitable mines. Land is and will remain a very crucial sort of asset for redevelopment. Do you see it as, is the company sort of starting to kind of see it from that perspective, especially so that, in fact, like CB had highlighted earlier, coal companies have CIL and the subsidiaries have in fact been very progressively talking about just transition. They have already those cells established within, even though it is kind of just starting. But what is your take on using the mine land from the perspective of growth and not just so that you kickstart the local growth again?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Regarding WCL has a land of about 38,000 hectares, out of which 33,000 is in Maharashtra. We operate in two states, Maharashtra and MP. Out of 54 mines that we are operating, 40 mines are in Maharashtra. And since 2009, we have a policy of mine closure plans. So we have planned for 93 mines, and we have opened escrow account for every mine. And we have deposited around 2,400 crores for mine closure. So that's on cards, that's going on. As regarding closure of mines, mines are closed for various reasons, not just for depletion of reserve, also for mining condition also. So historically, there were many mines in WCL. Till now, we have closed around 74 mines. 39 mines have been closed prior to 2009, and after that 30 mines have been closed. And we are thinking for repurposing of the land. For example, we are going for solar power plants. We have earmarked 840 hectares of land for solar, out of which 260 hectares is in Maharashtra, and balance is in MP. Then we are going for coal gasification. We have earmarked a land of about 550 acres for coal gasification in the district Chandrapur, where our 4 mines have been closed. And we have also gone for tender for that coal gasification. Tender was floated twice, but there was no bid. Actually, we have planned to go for coal gasification and ultimately going for production of ammonium nitrate to be used for our in our mines for making explosives. So that's one aspect. Other is regarding plantation. In WCL, we have done massive plantation. About 2 crore sapling has been planted. Even last year, we planted about 5,14,000 saplings. So about 7,500 hectares of land has been planted. And this we are monitoring also. We have a system of monitoring our plantation, that vegetation mapping by our consultant CMPDI. They are doing satellite imagery, and this has been proved that sampling, that plantation has been there. And then also we are going for some PSP project, pump storage project. We have identify 5 mines, 5 closed mines in Pench area of Madhya Pradesh, where we have vast amount of water, and also the hillock side by side, where we can go for pump storage. We, as a rough estimate, we can produce around 250 to 300 megawatt of PSPO. And recently, our secretary called visited those sites, and we are trying to have a system wherein we can involve private players for that on revenue sharing basis. This is the one aspect that we are exploring. In fact, we have land, and we are trying to explore possibilities to engage stakeholders. Uh, very recently, on 22nd April 22, Government of India has now allowed use of coal mining land for other purposes. In fact, the land that we acquire under Coal Bearing Act is only for coal mining. So now we have about 11 projects for which coal mines land can be leased out, mainly for coal and energy-based infrastructure. If in any private play, this land can be given to state government, to the PSU, and also to private players. But for private players, this has to be on the basis of competitive bidding. So these are the options that people may engage with WCL. So I hope we are open, we are searching for partners, and the land to be utilized is also our motto. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for sharing the WCL's perspective on redevelopment in detail. And it is very interesting to see how coal companies have sort of progressively taken this issue and not really shied away from the fact that this transition is gradually kind of taking shape. I'll come to you from WCL to Mahagenco. So if you can just, Ashok in his remarks had also highlighted the fact that NTPC has progressively taken up this task and this requirement of incorporating more and more RE into the portfolio, and very progressively taking it up not just within the company but also supporting other partners in understanding the requirements and developing projects. What is Mahagenco's take on this? What is the plan? Has that been sort of, is it materializing at the pace that perhaps is needed?
Hello. Thank you for inviting this wonderful session. I thought he should have been there to listen my reply, which which could have changed his perception. Mahagenco is doing its own bit. We have 8 gigawatt plant in the renewable energy sector by 2030, and we are already working on it. I won't dwell much on that plant, but I will stick to focus on the repurposing part. What repurposing approach Mahagenco is looking for, and some of the challenges which are going to appreciate on the challenges also which we are facing and how we are tackling on that. Mahagenco particularly have some old units which we are planning to phase out because they have served their life, which is more than 35 years old. But the challenge is that power demand is increasing day by day, and the central sector or CEA has given a mandate that you cannot phase out any unit till 2030. We have to continue to run those plants, and we have to be there in the grid with those plants till 2030. Now, what is a post 2030? Because we are purely an energy company, we are retiring some of our old unit which we have planned, and we are coming up with the latest 660 megawatt unit or 800 megawatt unit, which is already in phase. So phase-wise, we are taking out those unit and putting the new unit in the place. You must be aware that taking a land for any expansion project is a really challenging job. Even central CPSUs and state unit or government also face lot of problems to take up the land for the project. So we have to utilize the existing land itself after dismantling. One of these things we are doing at our Koradi thermal power station, which has retired 6 units, and in that place we are bringing 2 into 660 megawatt unit. So of course we are not replacing it with the green energy, but looking at the demand, we have to be with coal unit as long as we don't get RERTC. We don't get RERTC technology by way of more and more PSP or more and more storage facility. Till that time, we have to be with thermal plant. If you look at international experience, particularly Germany, which has closed down its nuclear plant and then closed down its thermal plant, they have to come back, or they have to buy the same power, not from their own country, but from the neighboring countries, which is giving them in the same way nuclear power. So the thing is that you cannot directly replace coal plant. Okay, one day one cannot say that, okay, I am closing all the coal-based plant and I will be with the RE plant. We have to look at the transition very carefully, unless and until we have the capacity or capability so that we can work with the RE. It's not possible that you can do away with this all fossil fuel related plants. So that is the thing. Transition is definitely going on. We are going with the more efficient, so we are using less coal and we are conserving it that way. Of course, renewable energy integration is the government of India's targets. So I just put the two terminology. Like, one is the concept of the RE bundling. You must be aware that they have mandated it to all thermal power plant to bundle their energy with the renewable energy. So we are also working with the 2 gigawatt plant or 2000 megawatt plant for bundling our thermal energy with that of the renewable energy. Apart from that, I will just introduce on the government of Maharashtra initiative. That is a MSKVY, Mukhyamantri Saur Krishi Vahini Yojana. It is a 2.0 Yojana. So to cater the farmers, that is, I call them, they have to be given the cheapest power. So to cater them, they have come up with the distributed generation point. And my company is taking stake of around 1.5 gigawatt, planning to contribute into it for 1.5 gigawatt in that area. It will definitely going to improve the sustainability, because we are going to give the cheap power, supporting the energy sector and producing the power where it is going to be consumed. So transition, of course, everybody is looking at the transition, and definitely we are also working on it. And that is what I am saying, that like Mahagenco is also working on the renewable energy and working very closely with all in the renewable energy transition. Thank you. I think I have exceeded the time. Thank you very
fine,
much.
Sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Pandit, I'll come to you because we'll continue with this renewable energy question. You've been working in power sector for decades now, and in across various aspects of it, regulatory policy, everything. The growth at the pace at which RE was expected to grow, and hence this question of energy security being parallelly addressed, that has not really happened for many reasons. There's PPAs, many power market constraints, etc. Maharashtra specifically, if we talk in terms of the state level progress, it's the 5th largest state as far as RE is concerned. But a lot of it is wind and DRE, which was there and is sort of happening. But in the second phase of growth, so to say, it was not really a major player. So within the constraints that exist for RE growth, how can this kind of growth be accelerated? What kind of strategies should the state should be looking at? If you can sort of share your thoughts on that.
Good afternoon, everyone. And let me again at the outset thank IFRS and the team for giving me this opportunity. And congratulations to Mr. Chandrabhushan and the entire team for very comprehensive and elaborate report that has come out, which touches upon various dimensions and facets of energy transition. So coming to your question, Mandavi, we did one study for Ministry of Power, Central Electricity Authority, along with LBNL modeling, looking at the grid for all India as well as couple of RE states and more specifically Maharashtra as well. How would the grid look like in 2030, and what is a optimal capacity expansion, and how would the thermal be dispatched in that scenario when we are trying to add more and more renewable into the grid? And the result of that study actually indicates that by 2030, it's possible to actually dispatch reliably the grid with kind of penetration of renewable that you're talking about. So today the renewable in Maharashtra, we are close to 11 gigawatt, comprising wind about 5 gigawatt, solar about 3.5 gigawatt, biomass, small hydro and others. And what we are expecting to add by 2030 as a most optimal solution is about, we can reach up to almost 40 gigawatt plus in renewables. That's almost 4 times the current capacity of renewable. Solar, obviously, to top it all, but even wind also could increase by about from today's level of 5 gigawatts almost close to 20 gigawatts. So kind of scale that we're talking about, and this is with the thermal continue to operate in a more efficient. Some of the plants, as we said, we probably may be required, not required to be phased out as per the current CS direction, but could operate in a part load, or some of them could operate because the demand is growing at a much faster pace in that sense. So to be able to look at this kind of a capacity addition, it leads to a huge amount of opportunity for businesses, investment, as well as for the employment opportunities in that sense. But your question is, we are talking about 5 to 6 gigawatt addition every year on year, when in the past we have been able to add not more than 2 gigawatt maximum in one of these years. So where does basically the solution lies, and how do we actually, in the context of particularly the 3 districts that we are talking about, Nagpur, Chandrapur, Yavatmal, and Gondia and around? So what is it that it's possible to do? And I don't want to look at the challenges, as you said, but suggest a possible potential solution. You talk about 6 Rs. I'd like to talk about 3 Ds. What are possible to look at more carefully? The first D is actually about decentralized distributed renewable power. And thanks to Prasanna ji, he did touched upon the Mukhyamantri Saura Krishi Yojana. We ourselves are working with Energy Department on implementation of MSKBI as a PMU there. It's a massive program for all over Maharashtra, about 7,000 megawatt of solarization of agriculture feeders that has been planned. And for these 3 districts that we're talking about, the estimated potential, at least in the initial first round, itself is about 500 to 600 megawatts, so to speak. If you look at 11 kV substations within 5-kilometer radius, imagine we are looking at least 150 to 200 projects of that size, which leads to a huge amount of employment opportunities for obviously with the reskilling and retraining of some of those guys who would be operating currently in the mining or otherwise sectors. So development of employment opportunity as well as entrepreneurship opportunities. So that's a decentralized distributed one, but that's on solar agriculture. Yesterday in the union budget and prior to that, Prime Minister actually announced 1 crore rooftop program. So that also is a huge opportunity, and decentralized distributed generation on rooftop scale, that will throw off multiple levels of scales of opportunity. And purely to look at, first of all, from conventional power employment per megawatt, the renewable itself goes to almost 5 times of that, and within distributed renewable, even double that opportunity that exists. So that's the second one, and the third one is actually about the second one is about development of business models. Why these things are not happening? We require a lot more utility driven. Maybe Mahajan is doing, MSC Diesel should also look at it. So we require a concrete business models to be able to deploy such distributed decentralized generation. And the third D is actually about, you talked about the District Mineral Foundation Fund. We have a 2,800 crores plus in state collected. Allocated is only 1,800 crores, and actually spent is only 1,200 crores. And within that 1,200 crores, on the skills development is hardly less than 5%. So you need to actually develop a proper programmatic approach to be able to how to best utilize these funds in a systematic programmatic manner. I'm just on dot, so I'll stop here with this. Thanks.
Thank you. No, I have a follow-up question for it, but I'll see if I have time. I'll come to you, Mr. Nolkar. In this conversation of repurposing, land is a very crucial subject, like we've already spoken about. And in addition to community, environment becomes a very crucial topic. We do see land degradation as a massive, massive concern in mining areas. What are your inputs in terms of what is perhaps the ideal approach to addressing this question in the context of course, redevelopment and green growth that we're talking about?
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me here. And um, coming to the question at hand, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that, whenever we are talking about renewable energy, we get drawn into the discussions of photovoltaic cells. But India, so we know that India has, if Ukraine and Alaska have their share of fossil fuel, we have our share of solar energy, which is massive. But the other point, which is less considered in this discussion, is that we also have the second most important resource which is required for renewable energy, which is soil. And soil, along with solar energy, can create the photosynthetic capacity that we need for the transition to the renewable energy. And so what we need today is land for the biomass-based economy, which is rare to get. And here we are sitting here and discussing about repurposing mines, which is a huge source of land here. If you look at the land available in India, India has about 380 million hectares of land parcel, of which around 90 million hectares are in a degraded condition. And in the bond challenge, we have given a commitment that we will be restoring about 30 million hectares of land, reclaiming it, 30 million hectares of degraded land. And the opportunity which I see in this room at this point of time is we have these degraded mines and mines which are abandoned and closed down for whatever reasons. They have the significant hectareage of land. I was just reading the report, and it says that 20,000 hectares are available in Maharashtra alone, which is phenomenal, right? If you want to run a 10 TPD plant of CBG, compressed biogas, you just need about 500 acres of land. And here we are talking about land parcel of 20,000 hectares. And that is the crucial part, which this is actually the elephant in the room. Can we create the opportunity of private partnership, like Mr. Singh was saying and Mr. Kotecha was also referring to, with private players to allow, so you just referred that the government has now allowed 11 projects on lands for mines. And the biomass-based economy is something which is there. So in the biomass-based economy, also there is a transitionary path, right? The lowest hanging fruit is the biomass pellets and the biomass briquettes that you have, which in Mr. Chandrabhushan's presentation, we saw that brick manufacturers are significant users of coal. But brick manufacturers, the significant use of timber is happening in bakeries, which is less visible. Right, and bakeries, like for example in Mumbai, you have bakeries exactly almost on every street, because you have all these vada pav stalls and all that. So biomass-based briquettes and pellets are something which is actually a small and medium-based enterprise. You don't need huge investments. The transition from that would be the CBG, the compressed biogas. And we have 3,000 CNG pumps today. We are planning to go to 6,000 CNG pumps in India very soon, doubling the capacity. Indian Oil Corporation is willing to sit across the table and sign a work order with you for the next 1 year to buy the CBG. So CBG plants there next to these degraded mines are something which are very much feasible. And then, of course, the final pathway is towards hydrogen. We can create green hydrogen. Today, the entire discussion around hydrogen in India is around electrolyzer based. And electrolyzer is going to consume thermal power. It's going to consume coal-based power. But here we are talking about power which can be driven by biomass-based green hydrogen. And in the transitionary path from biomass briquettes and pellets to CBG to hydrogen, there is a significant opportunity that lies here on that. So at the Center for Sustainable Development, we have actually been researching this problem and how can we meet our bond commitments with this. And we have actually created a model wherein you can effectively have private partnerships. You just need an investment about 80 to 100 crore rupees for around 700 hectares. We are working with some TATR in Maharashtra to create something around that. We are also working with sustainable just transition in Jharkhand, where they are keen on using this model in their degraded landscapes. So that becomes a huge opportunity that we are looking at. And the third thing which I want to say here is, the Campa funds. We have not been utilizing the Campa funds in the state, at least in Maharashtra, which I'm aware of. We're not utilizing it towards the extent that they should have been utilized. We have got what? Something like in the last 3 years, Maharashtra has got about 4,000 crores of Campa funds. Centrally, we have collected over 55,000 crores in Campa funds. Why are we not using that to create the viability gap funding which is required for repurposing mines? That's a significant opportunity there.
Excellent. I have a very easy job of managing time here because everybody is sort of kept within the limit. But no, thank you for two reasons. One is, of course, talking about this additional pool of public fund which can be sort of diverted towards this just energy agenda and transition agenda. And also the other thing was about biomass and how, and biofuels overall. How it is also aligned with the national government agenda at the moment, and it can easily be capitalized with some sort of right moves early on. I will open the floor right now to questions. There have been very diverse and interesting point of views which have come up during this conversation. I would request that you keep your questions short and introduce yourself with name as well as the organization that you're representing. Right at the back.
Hello everyone, I'm Yogesh from NSCFI. Basically I have a question for Kotecha sir. Now as Mahagenco is trying to put more efforts on establishing new solar capacity, one of the plants that, probably the oldest plant of Mahagenco, which is Paras, there was a capacity addition plan for 660 supercritical and then for a conventional one. But it was later changed to a solar project, and it faced a lot of backlash from the farmers that had contributed land for the land acquisition. And then there was an idea which was tried out for establishment of a agrivoltaics plant, which, I mean, there was a pre-feasibility study jointly published by Mahagenco, GIZ and Fraunhofer ISE. It was an excellent idea. But when we talk about all these things, just transition, which is to make sure that the resources, particularly human resources that we are losing out on when we shift to renewables or when we shift to other non-conventional energy resources. Second one is the choosing sustainable methods like putting agriculture along with renewables and then achieving something even more productive. There is this big problem of facing backlash from the people because they expect employment resources in returns with the land. So how difficult is it to convince them, and how do we address these kind of questions? How do we make sure that the sensitization is put in the place so that people who are in the ground, they understand the opportunities that might come with the newer options and not just stick to older ones, because that is one of the biggest hurdles in establishing new renewable plants.
Thank you. Thank you. So this question of community engagement is very interesting, both for Mr. Kotecha, and I would also request Mr. Singh to address this question of how are you engaging communities in this redevelopment and ensuring that they are on the same sort of platform.
Actually, just he asked the question about the Paras TPS. Paras TPS is one of our oldest TPS. Definitely we are working there on the RE plant, and also we are working there for the expansion of 660 because of that is a mandate from CA for us to expand the capacity. But anyway, I will come to the key point that how we engage the people working over there. Of course, when we install any thermal power project and we take the land, we give them the alternate employments. That is the policy. As per policy we are doing, and even in case of Paras, our employment, whatever employment facility we have to provide, we have already provided them. So that's not the issue. The issue is that whenever thermal power plant come in that area, that give a lot of business to the community around it. Like, I will just give you enough, I will just change your question. Like, if I have to close that plant tomorrow, what will happen? Again, if I go to close that plant, entire community settle around that area. They come to us that you don't close the plant, continue to running the plant because we are dependent on that. That is the reason, and that is where the repurposing, we have to take care of that. So we are mostly replacing thermal with the thermal. That is one thing. Now there is another thing, like the opposition face when we put the solar plant, because of course solar has a less employment opportunity as compared to the thermal. Thermal has a huge employment opportunity because lot of workforce goes into thermal power plant, and that is the main area. But for that purpose also, wherever we are doing, we are working on two things, like training our peoples around the stakeholders on the renewable opportunities. So we are having the two training center, and we are working with NISC and NIVE for imparting the training for Vayu Mitra and Surya Mitra. The two are this training purposes. We are giving them free of cost. So that will be a free of cost training, because part is compensated from NIVE and NISC. So that program also we are running parallelly, and that is done through our subsidiary company Mahajanko Renewable Energy Company Limited. So that way we are also doing. But definitely that challenges are always there when we take the land, and when a government agency is doing the project, the stakeholders are expecting more from us, and certain thing has to be done so that they are also get roped in for the benefit of that scheme. Yeah, so we have to select the site accordingly, and that way we are planning our renewable energy project. Thank you.
Regarding engagement with society, our biggest engagement is giving employment to land hostages. We are giving one employment for every 2 acres of irrigated land. And every year WCL is giving around 900 or employments in WCL. Regarding other engagements, we are skilling around 1,000 persons from our coal mining areas for different schemes like CPET or footwear training, or Ambuja cement or voltage, like that. So our target is to provide skilling of to around 1,000 persons every year. And then recently we have launched a scheme of Super 30, in which from our coal mining districts we are selecting 30 bright students from underprivileged families to train them for through Akash Baiju for preparing for IIT or NEET examinations. So these are various activities we are doing with society. We are spending around 14 to 15 crores of rupees every year under CSR. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think just to add to the responses that the panelists have given here, you cannot look at just transition as a question of just solar being the only solution, because then the employability doesn't sort of match. And that's why it's a more complicated question of green growth, wherein you are also exploring other options, and not, like biomass was mentioned as one and many others, and not just focus on solar as the solution. The next question, there are plenty, but yeah, maybe here.
Hi, this is Amit Chilve from Energy Department. Apart from this green energy transition, the energy efficiency also important one. So there is a M&B protocol for the consumption level for the various industries, specific energy consumption protocol. So my question is that, is there any M&B protocol for the emission level for the various industries, including TPC? And if yes, how periodically it is done?
You're asking the emissions
Yeah,
norm.
emission protocol,
Right.
measurement and verification protocol for emission level for the various industries,
Right.
including the thermal power plant.
Right. So there are emission norms you want to address.
There are already emission norms specified by like government agency. MPCB set up the certain norms. Even central government has set up the norm through Environment and Climate Control Department. And we have been given the timelines to implement those norms. For that, we need somewhere we are implementing FGDs for desulfurication. We are providing NOx equipment to control the NOx emissions, and of course the basic thing, that is the SPM, suspended particulate matter. So we are improving our efficiency, efficiency of the ESP, which were earlier designed for the lower SPM, and now we have to repurpose them to meet those norms. So those norms are already there, and we have been continuously monitored, and if certain things are missing, we immediately get the alert, and we have to rectify it at the earliest, immediately. Rather, I will say immediately.
Yes, sir.
It's a
How
continuous
periodically measurement and verification is done?
Pardon?
Measurement and verification, M&V, how periodically
It's a
they are done?
continuous. It's continuous. We have to give a link of our equipments reading to the MPCB or their regional center. It's not something I am reporting certain thing in pen and paper. It is directly the data is going to their site, and a call is coming, or their say communication is coming to us directly based on that.
Okay, it is for TPC, but what about
Yes.
for other industries like
I'm
cement
not
and-
aware about
can-
that, but
yeah.
being a
The
thermal
panel
power
is-
plant
Yeah.
person, I know that much.
Thank you.
For coal mines, we have installed 15 number of CAAQMS, that is continuous ambient air quality monitoring stations, and from that data is going throughout continuously.
Okay, so next question.
Hello. Good afternoon, panel. My name is Matrika Gimire. I am a PhD scholar at IIT Bombay. My question particularly is for Mr. Kotecha, but anybody else can also chime in. Like you said, that there are times when a plant has to be dismantled and again a new one constructed there and so on. Are you exploring, or are there any R&D potential investments for carbon capture, utilization and storage that you have been exploring? And yeah, some comments on that basically.
For our Chandrapur super thermal power plant, we are working with the NEERI in Nagpur for carbon capture. But frankly speaking, this is a very new area. We are working on it. I'm not in position to say with the command that this much quantity I'm going to do it. Even NEERI is also doing a research with us how we can capture the carbon. And this is the definitely area we are working on it. But again, I will add one step further. If an energy sector, or particularly a power sector, has to do such things in the future for the benefit of that, it carries a cost, and from somewhere or some compensation that has to come, because we are in a purely regulated sector, and getting such expenses passed through or passing those things on the consumer is not a good idea. But this is a bigger goal which our industry is trying to do for the nation, and that is the reason this has to be given a special dispensation or thought. That is the requirement.
Right. I think the role of state is particularly crucial across a lot of elements that we're talking about. And in fact, Mr. Pandit, I wanted to ask you this question with regard to DRE. You talked about how significant it is. And across geographies within the country, we've seen that DRE has grown when the state has kind of put its weight behind it, whether it's Chhattisgarh or Rajasthan in the form, or Gujarat in the form of rooftop. Is the mechanism in Maharashtra adequate? What kind of capacity building within this space? Because there's awareness creation, there's models to be sort of introduced. How do you assess Maharashtra's position with respect to that, and how does it sort of scale up?
Yeah, so when we say distributed renewable, or I would say distributed energy resources, not just renewable one, and there are plenty of such examples, and but to limit to, as we said about rooftop to begin with, in fact, Maharashtra is in the forefront, if not number one, at least number two right now in terms of rooftop solar deployment. The net metering framework regulation that MERC has actually issued, and incidentally, if you would have recently seen the Green Energy Open Access framework, which actually has enabled up to 100 kilowatt also. I mean, it has lowered down the capacity that you can actually, set up the projects for meeting the consumer requirements up to 100 kilowatt as well. On the solar agriculture, as we said, government of Maharashtra has got a very ambitious plan to at 11 kV and 33 kV or even 11 kV and below, almost 7,000 megawatt of solar agriculture, solarization of agriculture feeders program in place. The tenders for that is cluster-based program they had started, and more than 14 clusters tenders are already out, and so that's close to 3,000 megawatts. So that's a pretty advanced stage. Maharashtra, I would say, has taken a very advanced steps in terms of distributed renewable energy resources. On when you say energy resources, also the storage at the distribution level is also very important. So there are quite a few conducive policy framework, although we're not yet seen completely commercial scale projects currently being deployed, but there are projects which are at a very advanced stage of planning and designing. I would like to also talk about, since you talked about the CCUS for thermal, we did a project for MSPGCL, in fact, in the desktop study for, if I may say, Nasik thermal power plant possibilities of, repurposing. And one of the aspect that we looked at also was what would be the CCUS requirement, potential, and the cost involved. And we could come across internationally only 4 installations of CCUS, and in the cost of those, when you translate it down, it's not just the capture, the storage and transportation to places for storage. It work out to more than 6.5 to 7 rupees per unit in the today's cost. So it was not economically viable, as Prasannaji did mention. It's a regulated regime in any case. And finally, whether what market could absorb at this point in time. That's a very preliminary study. Yeah.
A couple of more questions, perhaps.
Hello everyone, I'm Nishtha, I'm Associate Director, Asia Society Policy Institute, and we are experts in carbon pricing. The Indian government is working towards implementing carbon credit trading systems, and part of it will be emission trading systems. And what we've seen globally in EU ETS, and Japan is coming up with its own ETS. So emission trading systems have a huge potential of generating finance. Well, that can also lead to closure of thermal power plants, but I think that is something that that can be really tapped into when it comes to generating finance. It also needs work on reform of power sector, etc. But I want to understand from you, if you have, what do you think about CCI? Power sector is not supposed to be included in it in the first phase, but eventually it is, because all the PAT sectors will be included in CCTS eventually. So I want to understand what are your thoughts around CCTS that is coming up, and the revenue that can then be utilized for just energy transition.
CCTS, I said, we are just carbon capture, we are just initiated the thing. But the issue is that with every such norms coming into the PAT, it is going to add the cost to us. And of course, it will also nudge us to improve the things in our area. So these are the two things. First thing, if we are not improving, then it is going to cost us. But if we are improving, then that is a nudge. The issue is that finally, when we are trying to improve upon it, there is something, the cost, somebody is going to bear on it. Somebody has to bear that cost. So just I told, because I am not aware how much it's going to cost on the carbon capture, and whether I am going to get it something in return for that activity. It is at very nascent stage, but definitely we are sure that we will like to work in that area. We are at least explore that area and see to it that if we can improve, definitely work on that and improve on that, looking at the cost economics.
So yeah, if I can add to that, this whole business of carbon pricing and emission trading is actually going to result in higher profitability for abandoned TPPs or abandoned mines. See, if you get into the business of making CBG, compressed biogas, your profitability is around 10% or 11% at best. But if you are selling the slurry as biomass nutrient, then you add about another 15% to it. And then if you're now selling the carbon credits, then you add another chunk to your profitability. So this business, whenever it gets through in India, it'll actually make this entire repurposing of coal mines much more profitable than it is today. And I completely agree with what Mr. Kotecha is saying. You cannot price at this point of time this highly regulated industry, but these new emerging technologies are not at the moment regulated. So that's the chance for your competitive advantage and profitability.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all my panelists for this wonderful discussion. I'll unfortunately have to close this session at the moment because we're running on a very tight schedule. Thank you again, sir, for being part of this conversation. Thank you.